While Amtrak's train, the Cardinal, begins its westward run in New York City, my wife Liz and I are catching it in Washington, D.C. The Capitol building is the most prominent government building in the District of Columbia, and it's a good place to launch your tour of Washington, D.C. Visit the office of a U.S. representative or senator, and they'll fix you up with a tour of the Capitol, a place where Congress meets to make laws and carry on other business as directed by the U.S. Constitution. Oregon 2nd District Congressman Greg Walden's office supplied this tour guide, who led our small group deep into the bowels of the sprawling House office complex. He's a staff member and knows his way around these corridors.
It's like we're in a mine.
Roman gods and goddesses? Here we're seeking the end of this huge line. All these cool tunnels finally brought us to our goal, the U.S. Capitol building. This is where you can visit the Capitol without any help from your congressman. Our little group, we just weaved through, stayed together. Soon we found ourselves under the massive Capitol Dome. This is a jaw-dropping part of the tour. All these figures below the windows tell stories of historical events important to the United States. America's discovery by Columbus and Pocahontas saving John Smith are two examples.
This rim was done, a third of it by Remedi. So if you see the aircraft, seen to the right of the aircraft is Columbus. So everything from Columbus discovering America to the Mexican-American War was done by Remedi. He would have done more, but when he was working on the Mexican...
Further down are paintings of important historical events.
Thomas Jefferson is the man in red, the red vest. His feet and hands are larger than the hands of every other person at the table. So Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, Adams, this symbolized the fact that he had a larger hand in crafting.
Our first commander-in-chief, George Washington.
And in those days, General Washington surrendering his commission. Imagine 5 minutes before it was taken or set. He's sitting in the chair, surrounded by the royal robes. Someone told me it looks like a Snuggie. I promise you it's not.
The shortest way to our next stop was this little subway. Our guide told us he wasn't supposed to use it for tour groups like ours, but Liz charmed him into leading us aboard.
I've done it at a brisk pace. You can beat it by foot, but you have to count. He will beat you there, but you'll beat the doors. That's the trick. I know a lot of people like to do this.
Yes. This is cool.
It is.
I missed out on the White House tour.
Well, the rest of Washington is open, except for the monument, but that's not sequester related. That is earthquake related. The earthquake had a year and a half ago.
This led us to Statuary Hall. Each state is allowed to have 2 statues of prominent people in their history. One of Oregon's statues goes all the way back to statehood almost, and that's Senator Baker. Our tour of the Capitol was worth the crowds and the security checkpoints, but we were glad to get outside again to the mall, where the sprawling monument to World War II is located. We had started the day at the Capitol, where Congress fulfills the duties of the legislative branch of government. Behind the Capitol is the U.S. Supreme Court, performing judicial branch actions. A careful look revealed a deception. This is a huge curtain masking the renovation work being done to the building. The highest profile branch of government is the executive branch, housed here in the White House. Due to Congress's sequester, We weren't able to tour where every president since John Adams has lived. I had previously toured the White House, and I highly recommend it when Congress returns to funding the government. We at least got to see the White House from the outside. Curiously, this group of people were stationed on the roof as I was videotaping. Here at the West Wing, a U.S. Marine stands guard to protect the president. While we were on our way to the White House, we encountered this spontaneous crowd waiting for, well, it became obvious as events unfolded. We later learned that this was President Obama returning from a trip to Florida. There's a lot to do in Washington. You can visit this memorial to the writer of the Declaration of Independence and our third president, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson holds center stage here, surrounded by his magnificent words of the Declaration of Independence, asserting that all people are endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights. His words that gave me goosebumps were these, warning that if the country didn't deal with the slavery issue, that it would lose God's blessing and descend into bloodshed. My reaction shouldn't be surprising. They made Jefferson, dependent on his own slaves, tremble. The Jefferson Memorial is located in the tidal basin. It shares this area with the sprawling monument to Franklin Roosevelt. Among his numerous achievements during his record 4 terms as president, he's known for leading the country out of the Great Depression and his fireside chats on the radio, giving U.S. citizens hope during the dark days of the Depression and World War II. The tidal basin's newest monument was this one, honoring Martin Luther King, Jr.
It's okay. Mom, I just spelled this!
People from all over the world come to pay their respects to this peaceful fighter for justice, this advocate of nonviolence. The monument includes a line out of his mountaintop speech, delivered the night before his death. For those who want to know more thoughts from this civil rights champion, these words from Martin Luther King can be read on this wall. A must-see site for us was the National Archives, and the must-see part of this is the original copies of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. We made sure we saw those founding documents and had to pull ourselves away from the outstanding displays of other national historic treasures. Our trip to Washington aboard Amtrak's Cardinal was timed with the Cherry Blossom Festival. The late winter snowstorm that preceded us delayed the blossoms. A year later, our timing was perfect. And so was the way of enjoying the cherry blossoms. Because of the Potomac River, Washington, D.C. can be enjoyed by boat. From Alexandria, Virginia, you can board a water taxi for a great view of the city. Or, if you're very fortunate, you can enjoy a river cruise on this paddle wheel boat. We were celebrating my nephew's wedding. The boat was chartered by one of my new in-laws.
Refurbished. What's the name of it out there?
There's news that's going down too on this cherry blossom paddle wheel boat.
Cruising toward the city, right where the river channel splits into two, we saw this Navy base.
Could be Marine One.
It's a research center, and apparently the home of numerous cherry trees. Washington's Cherry Blossom Festival stems from the gift of cherry trees to the United States from Japan. That gift was made in 1912 by the people of Japan, and the first two were planted by First Lady Helen Herron Taft. The general public gets to enjoy all this color throughout the Washington, D.C. area, especially in the tidal basin, where the trees are numerous. Turning from nautical to terrestrial, this is Washington's Union Station. This is where we'd board Amtrak's Cardinal to begin our westward journey home. Out in front is a statue of Christopher Columbus. The Cardinal was waiting for us here, having started its journey in New York City that morning. Here in Washington, it's exchanged its electric locomotive for a diesel electric, the one that will take us to Chicago via the scenic route. Once we were aboard, the Cardinal wasted no time in pulling out of the station.
We are pulling out of Washington, D.C. Union Station. Heading toward Chicago.
We're pulling out.
They're pulling out.
I heard you, I heard the tape. Oh, there you go now, there's DC.
Yeah, we're out of the tunnel now. So this is just Washington with lots and lots. These are apartment buildings. Some of them is probably office building. Not everything's monumental here.
There's a colon.
Leaving Washington, D.C., and seeing all these office buildings, I reflected on the thousands of organizations that have offices here in the country's capital.
Really?
It's not surprising that my union, the National Education Association, has a presence here, but it seems that every trade association, some you would never think of, to social clubs, all have a presence here in Washington. And then there are the sprawling offices of the various government agencies. When people talk about big government, I can understand some of what they mean. Still, it seems to me that any discussion about reducing the size of the government should begin with listing the things our government does well, like supporting national parks, protecting the environment, and supporting Amtrak.
Lots of green space.
It's hard not to be political in Washington, D.C., but crossing the Potomac River, we left Washington behind and entered the rest of the country. These small towns gave the engineer ample cross streets at which to blow the whistle. The countryside of Virginia was quieter. I recognized some of these places. On our trip out, these hills were covered in snow. That's all gone now. Trains always show me that there's still a lot of country in our country.
Oh, here's that cool bridge. Oh, and a train waiting on it. Look at this. Oh, man.
At one stop, we got to watch some switching yard action.
I think, oh, here we go. They're going to hook up that car to that engine. I'm going to get it right on video, too. So this is still Clifton Forge. There's some kind of old tower coming up. Let's zoom in and see what that looks like close up. There's a big hole in the roof. That's not a hole. Some equipment up there. Some kind. This looks like a fueling place for the trains.
Here's a common sight on West Virginia railroads: coal cars. Now we were going alongside the New River. This would be our companion for much of our journey through West Virginia. Lots of scenery here.
Railroad bridge. Thurmond.
Under the bridge. There we go.
Speaking of bridges, we were approaching the granddaddy of bridges on this route, the towering New River Bridge, an iconic symbol of the state of West Virginia. On one of the bridge landings, there were probably people watching our train pass below. It's a popular spot to watch trains go by the river. We got that view of the bridge just in time. Night fell, and the new day found us just north of Lafayette, Indiana.
And we're about to enter a small town in Indiana. They got a nice quiet little place. Grain elevators.
I don't think of little farming towns like these every time I eat, but I do think of them from time to time, and how we are able to prosper because of the 1% of Americans who still farm. Look at the shadow of the train through the window. You can see the locomotive. In no time, we were in Chicago, where the Cardinal terminates. And just like that, we were under Chicago's Union Station. Yes, under the station. Our long scenic journey was over. From here, we'd catch the Southwest Chief to Los Angeles. But that's another rail adventure.